everyone, and welcome back to part one of our Social Contracts podcast, brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Arizona. I'm GraceMarie Theesfeld, your host for today's episode, and joining me to explore its meanings and modern application are our panelists, who are fabulous college students in Arizona, Mikah, Ishita, and Emra. 250 years ago, the Declaration of Independence did more than announce freedom. It declared a social contract. It said the government exists only with the consent of the governed, that its duty is to secure the rights and representation of the people. Those principles, liberty, justice, and accountability, became the foundation for the Constitution. And just over a decade later, they were written into the Bill of Rights. Freedom of speech and press, the right to assemble, freedom of religion, due process, equal protection. The Declaration voiced the grievances. The Bill of Rights set down its remedies. Together, they define what we the people expect from our government, and today those expectations remain urgent. As we continue to face suppression, exclusion, and unequal representation, the promise of that social contract still calls us forward. The fight for a government that truly represents all of us is not finished. It is the very work of democracy. The grievances in the Declaration of Independence can feel like a long catalog of complaints, but they weren't random. They revealed a pattern of power used to control, silence, and weaken the people. For our discussion today, we'll group the grievances into 6 themes. Number 1, violations of representative government and self-governance. 2, abuse of judicial power. 3, taxation without representation. 4, economic restrictions and control. 5, military oppression. And 6, acts of tyranny and war. 6 themes, 1 message. The colonists were demanding a government that served the people, not the other way around.
Grievance 4. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual and also uncomfortable and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Grievance 5. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. Grievance 6. He has refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining, in the meantime, exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
Our first discussion question today is, do you all think that fatiguing the legislature into compliance is something that happens today? Why or why not?
I think it absolutely still happens today, just in ways that are different than during the colonist time.
Yeah.
So we see from the grievance that I interpret it in the way that they were talking about the king deliberately dragging things out, calling assemblies at inconvenient times or locations, or ignoring requests from the colonists until lawmakers just gave in. And today we see something similar through the filibuster, through partisan gridlock, and through endless committee delays. So nothing moves forward until one side just gives in from the fatigue because they're so tired, right? We all have lives. We all want to go home. But then we lose the thing that makes democracy so special is dialogue, right? And talking with each other and debating about, our different opinions on politics and policies. So I think it's a real issue for the state of our democracy when we are fatiguing into compliance because it means we're giving in. We're not thinking critically. We're not using, for the representatives, we're not using the power that these constituents gave us to actually use our position for good, right? And do what we're elected to do. So that raises the question whether our system is functioning in the spirit that it was meant to.
Right off of that, I'm not sure which bill it was, but I know recently there was one that was passed, and a lot of the representatives who were voting on it, they said that they actually didn't agree or they weren't sure of it, but they felt that if they didn't comply, they would face backlash. And while that isn't necessarily fatiguing, I think it definitely is kind of that fear, right? They are so fatigued by the state of the political sphere that they would rather choose the easy way out. And while that's not the traditional, interpretation of it, that's what I truly believe. As a whole, the political sphere, the way it works right now is so fatiguing. It's so scary that politicians who are meant to represent us choose ease over the fight because it's just that miserable for them.
Yeah, and I mean, if you are one of those representatives that like you don't have the passion to like stay
not be
there
there.
and debate, then you really shouldn't be there, right? We should find someone. I know we were talking about Zoran Mamdani, who really seems like he's passionate about all of his issues.
He has a spark under him, for
right,
sure.
Right. He's like running for a purpose, for a reason, and you can tell he wants to be there. So that's why we have democratic elections.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this reminds me of is in Arizona, it's so difficult for young people or working class people to be in the state legislature because you're only paid $24,000 a year, and even folks that maybe are coming from Tucson or from northern Arizona or just outside Maricopa County are having to drive all the way to Phoenix to be able to go to session and to do the work that they were elected to do. And so I think that makes it kind of fatiguing our Arizona lawmakers because it's difficult to be a representative, especially when they're not in the majority, because they're trying to do the work, but never are their bills heard. And so I think the folks who are in power, the majority party, is fatiguing the members who are in the minority because they can't actually do the work that they're doing. And then on top of that, you have to be doing this full-time job, is what it is, but being paid a part-time. And then also a lot of these people are full-time teachers or they have their own business or all of these different things. And so I think that is kind of the modern example of making it very inaccessible to, do this role.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Micah, with the geographical barriers. I remember calling the state representatives and senators for league work.
For 411.
And, either the assistant always says, oh, they're out of office, you can't come, Fridays. Or the assistant, just isn't that enthusiastic about, relaying that information or request from a constituent. So that's also problematic and also sad from a constituent viewpoint. For sure.
I have one point to this that I want to add. I see this almost as like a bimodal distribution where on the one hand, we have all the things that you all mentioned, where we have legislatures being fatigued into compliance from their side of the aisle, right? And even we have probably, what would the word for it be? Dark money in politics, they're getting money from corporations and corruption. They're getting money from people and places and things that they probably shouldn't be getting money from.
For sure.
But they're getting money from them nonetheless for the reasons that you guys bring up. The salary is low, they're tired, but then they get fatigued into complying with certain bills that they might not necessarily agree with. Yeah. On the other hand, I think we as citizens and constituents of these politicians have an obligation ourselves to fatigue the legislature into our compliance and to say, you know what, I really think this needs to be passed. This needs to be passed. And that is part of our responsibility as citizens to call your senators, call your representatives, tell them, I want this bill passed or you better not vote yes on this. We have that obligation as well to fatigue them too. And that sounds a little harsh, but it's true. And at the end of the day, these politicians took on a noble role to serve a group of people. And if that's what you signed up for, you better believe you're going to be hearing from them. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah. Kind of going into the easy way out thing. I feel totally it is our duty to remind them that not remind them, but remind them of they're here to serve the people. Right. And the easy way out is absolutely not going against what the people want.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Moving into our next question, how does making government inconvenient or inaccessible affect people's ability to participate? And do you all think we see examples of this in today's government?
I think we absolutely do. I want to bring up a very recent example of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
With the Jimmy Kimmel show, we saw how his, he voiced a concern, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just was totally taken away. His ability to participate was entirely restricted. And I think, and it's not only that, his own freedom of speech, but it's when everybody who views the show sees that, there's fear stricken in them. People feel like they're not, they don't have a voice at this they don't have a seat at this table. They don't have a voice in this conversation. And, that's exactly I think it's affect people's ability to participate being decreased makes government more inconvenient and inaccessible because they feel at the end of the day, if a government is meant to represent me and my voice is wrong, how am I supposed to be a part of this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we see it when I go to school board meetings or go to the state legislature to watch committee meetings or testify. And there's a number of things. I think a lot of time people go into these meetings to try to, increase their knowledge base. They might have students or their children are in the school board meetings, but they go and there's just so much jargon that's involved within the political process or within education. And I think that limits a lot of people. They feel that they themselves might be inadequate to even be speaking to the issues that are being brought forth. And I think so that aspect is very limiting. I think obviously there's time and place restrictions. Like a lot of these people, if you're, again, down from Tucson and want to go testify at the Arizona Capitol, that's very, very restrictive.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And we even, there's the RTS system, request to speak, but even then to sign up, you have to physically sign up within the Arizona Capitol building to be able to sign on to those different things. And I think one of the number one things I hear from people too of why they're not going to testify at a school board meeting or at the state capitol is because I think people feel like the decisions are already made. And so there's no reason for them to go and speak because they know that the Republicans are going to vote and how they're going to vote, and they know that the Democrats are going to vote a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so that no matter what you do, and you can, go cry up on the lectern, give your personal story, do all of these things that, should be effective. But at the end of the day, sadly, a lot of these decisions are already decided. And it's kind of just a formality or kind of a smokescreen for the politicians to be putting on this show and saying, hey, we're listening to people, but are they really? And so I think there's a lot of different things that need to be done to actually truly incorporate people's voices within our democratic system. But I think we see countless examples of inaccessibility today.
I absolutely concur with you. I had experience attending the city council meetings, and at the end of every meeting, anyone from the audience could come and speak about whatever they want for like 30 seconds. And, oftentimes you have the same people coming up and speaking about something that's really important to them. And then you see these city council members who are just like laying in their chair and like looking around, not really focusing on the audience member person speaking. And it's, I get it, like, right, fatiguing because it's a long meeting, right? But, that time is the chance for that audience member to really speak about something they're passionate about. And it's what makes democracy really great. But on this question about, inconveniency and accessibility in the government, I think we see it a lot, especially in our elections. For example, our polling places in Arizona, a lot of them have closed down. Voting centers, right? We see every legislative session, there's a bill that wants to ban voting centers. We see on election day, right? I love mail-in ballots. I mail in my ballot. But a lot of people like to stand in line on election day. And for oftentimes, right, we were election poll monitors. They stand in line for hours, and it's so inaccessible to students. I wrote an article about this, but it's so inaccessible to students who have class on Tuesday. That is an excuse. People who have work, I saw people come in at 4 or 5 a.m. to stand in line. And you can tell they really care about voting, right? They want to participate. But these little barriers that just make it so inaccessible is so sad to see. And it makes fewer people actually go out and vote. We've seen the student vote decrease year after year since 2016. So people are starting to check out, and we have to reinvigorate this fight in them that it is worth it, right, to stand in line, to voice your opinion. And also with RTS, right, the bills in the legislature, even federal, state, they're so complex, right, with the language, legal language that's oftentimes really hard for the regular, working class citizens, voter to understand. And with the RTS, oftentimes it's 20 or 30 people, speaking their mind on this bill out of 8 million citizens in Arizona. It's really sad to see that not many more people participate in democracy when this process, request to speak, is something that is unique to our state. So I like that the league really pushes that, but we need more of those, processes that really eliminate these barriers.
Yeah, I want to talk about that as well, and the legislative season, and just some of the work that I've been doing with the league in the past, like this past January when the state legislature was in session, not only trying to figure out how to understand the jargon that they use in these bills, but also understanding the website. Yeah. The website is so hard confusing. To navigate. Yeah. It's super confusing, and I grew up with technology. I grew up with computers. I'm saying this as a 21-year-old. I cannot figure out this user interface. And were it not for the guidance that I had with like my supervisors and the other volunteers with the league, I would not know what the heck was going on. There's codes for the different committees that don't make any sense. And then you have strike everything bills, and it's like, what is going on? Like, it's so confusing. And then they have stuff like, it's not a common sense interface. It doesn't make sense. And it's hard for people to even understand like what's going on in a bill or what the main points are. And it's so frustrating because it really feels like another effort to not only like fatigue people out of participation, but also like making government inaccessible and inconvenient, because now you have to go through a whole webinar to try to understand how to just use the website. It's just super frustrating.
It almost feels like trying to keep voices outside of the conversation. Like it feels very purposeful.
Exactly. Elitism almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's totally
100%.
Yeah. 100%. Even if you don't have access to internet, because I know requesting to speak, right? You have to go online.
Everything
and if you're an elderly person and you don't really know how to use a website, then you can't speak.
Right.
Even for standing in line, like if like the elderly people with disabilities, like it's like impossible. Like elderly people can't, like for them, like the internet is hard to navigate. Sometimes mail-in ballots is hard to navigate, but also standing in line for so long is so hard and so tiresome. It's like, it really feels so like designed to keep participation low, which is crazy because that's directly against our democracy.
Yeah, definitely. Moving into our next question. Does modern democracy guard against invasions on the rights of the people? What do you guys think?
I think technically, yes. Because
in theory,
we have things like impeachment. So technically,
right.
Yes. In practice, I don't know.
Not
always. Our rights are like really being infringed upon. I mean, like as we speak, right? Like there's so many rights that are infringed upon. They come up, but almost every politician who has a seat at the table, who's a part of this conversation, they usually turn a blind eye to it. And those who don't, those who actually like, you know, fight for what the people want, they're
minority.
They're termed radicals. Yeah.
And
yes.
But it's but it's not radicalism, it's representation, right?
Right.
The second anybody is like for example, like AOC, right? Like she'll speak up about minorities or something, and it's deemed radical. Like there's just so many politicians who like, they're all, even though they're supposed to represent all groups of people, they are all very representative of one.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question. Invasions on the rights of the people. I think it's so timely today, where such important documents like our Constitution and our democratic institutions, we are losing trust in them because of executive actions, legislation, court rulings that are fighting against those democratic rights. And I specifically, like I saw on TikTok yesterday, I was watching, it like pops up for me. It knew I was coming here today. But a U.S. citizen in California, he owns like a car wash business, and ICE came into his business and raided the whole place, took 4 or 5 employees. The founder owner, he was a U.S. citizen. They slammed him. Mind you, he's 75 years old, has a heart condition. He has an accent and he has an ethnic name. But that's the only thing, right? And he's like, no, I can show you my papers. It's in my wallet. I have the papers of my employees. Like, they're all citizens. They don't care. They wouldn't listen. I don't know if I can use language here, but they said you don't F with ICE. And that's crazy. And it's very sad that, you know, I'm a U.S. citizen. It's sad that your rights as a citizen, they don't matter anymore.
Your citizenship is questioned.
Yes.
Like a keyword, invasion. Like, this isn't like, it's not like somebody's status should not be the first thing you think about when you see them, like at all.
Yeah, I think prejudice and just is so prevalent in our society, right? Just by looking at someone, you have this predetermined notion of them that they're not a citizen, that they came here illegally, and that's so wrong on so many levels.
Yes. Especially living in Arizona, like any brown person is assumed undocumented.
Yeah.
Like I'm Indian, but I'm like a lot of times people will be like, "Are you documented?" Yes, I am. I promise. I was born here.
Right. But the fact that we've even gotten to a point in society where people think that's an appropriate question to ask.
Yes.
And also where we're using that as a means of judgment to determine like whether or not someone deserves to be treated humanly.
100%.
Like it's just ridiculous. And it's such a degradation of like basic human rights and just like, oh my gosh.
It's an invasion.
Moment of silence.
Very much an invasion. Like invasion is such a strong word, but I think that's the perfect word for that.
So it's so ironic. Like you're supposed to guard against it, but you're actively participating and promoting it. Yeah. And I think it has a lot to do with how prevalent white supremacy and racism is in our institutions.
And how it's built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Micah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like we talked about earlier with the rise of distrust of our institutions and government, kind of provides the opportunity for a power vacuum. And we've seen time and time again throughout history that is the rise of tyrannical governments or the rise of kind of a strongman leader. And so I think it's hard when we see it like invasions on the rights of the people, and how does modern democracy kind of guard against that? But there are people who... Republicans and Democrats, two different sides, have different ideas of what the rights of the people are. And so they're utilizing somewhat the means of democracy to achieve invasions on the rights of the people and what we would probably think. And so I think it's difficult because a lot of these things are hard to dismantle because the Republican Party has been doing this for decades. They've institutionalized the things that they're doing now 10 plus 15 years ago. They were thinking about it then. And so I think that democracy can be used against these invasions and on the rights of the people, but that there are also functions of democracy that kind of allow for it to also happen. And so I think it's kind of it's difficult because we've seen, like I said, in history, the democratic countries, people were able to come in and kind of move a lot of these things, and the people like it. They like what they're doing, but when we see that, like Emra said, the kind of systemic racism and the white supremacy that we see in the United States, is just very institutionalized, and I think that's what people are kind of seeing and why they're okay with ICE going in to all of these different places, and these consistently we see women not being able to decide what to do with their own bodies, or people within the LGBTQ plus community facing so much harassment and different things in the last few years, and so it's definitely scary times.
Yeah, I just have one more thing to add on that. I know we talked about people disengaging, but I do want to mention, I think I've heard a lot of people lately, they say, "Oh, but this doesn't affect me."
Oh my gosh.
Or like,
I hate hearing that.
or I'm not into politics right now, or, it just, I'm not hurt by it, right? But
very privileged.
Yeah, privileged. And the personal is the political, right?
Yep.
So it's all about having empathy, right? If that doesn't mean that if you're not experiencing it right now, that it couldn't affect you at a later time.
Yeah.
Because we all have our own different experiences, how we grew up, our background, where we work, our identities, and they mean so much to us. And depending on who is in power or what is the movement at the time, it could always change in an instant. And I really want to send a message to those people to kind of rethink their mindset on that. And
entirely going off of that real quick, I think like an invasion on any people, like on the rights of any people, is an invasion of like all people, because it'll come back to you. It's gonna come back to you. Right now, if it's about colored people, it's gonna become about women. It's gonna become about all types of groups, usually not white males, but it'll become about every single group of people, even maybe white males. Like, you never know. The second it affects one group of people, it means it's allowing to do the same to any other group.
Yeah, and I think what you said too points to the dangers of the United States being such a self-interested and individualized country, and people, looking out for their own interests. And that's what I think, I said it earlier, but people kind of realizing that if we help the bottom of our society, it raises everyone up. If we,
For sure.
Provide the basic services for everyone, it's going to just increase the wealth of our communities overall. And so I think that's what we need to kind of be, portraying to people, and understanding that communities are important. And I think we've just lost that. And I think since COVID, we became very separated. We've become very partisan. And so, I think that's the goal, is for the United States to just focus and remind people that we're in this together, and that we need to be advocating for the things that benefit all of us, not just one person.
Yeah, 100%. As we've seen today, the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence weren't just a random list of complaints. They reflected deeper concerns about representation, justice, immigration, and the abuse of power. Thank you for joining us for episode 3 of our Social Contracts podcast, Breaking Away from Power Without Accountability, brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Arizona. We hope today's discussion gave you new insights into the Declaration and the way its principles still echo in our civic life today.
Be sure to tune into our next episode, as we'll continue to dive into the 27 grievances, focusing on what they teach us about the social contract and how we can view them through a modern lens.